All right, welcome back to the TCI studios. We are already getting ready for Georgia. I won't finish that saying. I put a thread on the board today, and everybody thought I was going to just go right into the song that Clemson fans like to sing, but we won't do that. We are getting ready for next season. A lot of good news since the Sugar Bowl for Clemson. A lot of big-time players coming back. And this segment, we're going to talk about the defense, what the guys coming back means, what we think we might see on the defense. And if you're going to be excited, if you're a Clemson fan and you look at the defense and all the guys that are coming back, you should be real excited. All right, Will, let's start with the place that I think we've got the biggest impact, and that's the defensive line. We talked about Foster's coming back from injury, was out the whole year. Xavier Thomas announcement, he's coming back. Huge news for Clemson. And you got all these other guys that are going to be, did a good job this year. Didn't do great in the last couple of, and obviously in the Sugar Bowl, and had some issues there at Notre Dame when they went on the road. But overall, a good season statistically for the defense. But that defensive line, next year will rival the Power Rangers and will be deeper than the one we had when the Power Rangers were here.
They're definitely going to be deeper than the Power Rangers. Now, from a standpoint of, who the Power Rangers have at starters with Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence and Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant, all the four of those guys in the NFL, I don't think from a starting four they're that level yet. And I say yet because I think potentially
let's
they
go
could be.
through these guys. Brian Brzee, you think he's going to play in the NFL?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Tyler Davis, you think he's going to play in the NFL?
Yes.
Okay. Miles Murphy, you think he's going to play in the NFL?
Yes.
Okay. Xavier Thomas, you think he's going to play in the NFL?
Has a chance to. I do think he's
the
going to.
answer's yes.
I think he's going to play in NFL, but we've seen more consistency out of those guys than Xavier.
KJ Henry, he's going to play in the NFL.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Then you got Maskell, Foster,
I think so. Yes. I mean,
all right, that's 6 guys that are going to play in the NFL.
Right. I think potentially, yes, they're going to be what those guys are at now. Those guys are in the NFL. So I think potentially you're correct. But the thing that's different about this defensive line that I like better is what you mentioned going in, is that they're deeper. The guys behind them, they have 5-star, 4-star talent right there behind them that I think when like a Tyler Davis gets injured next year, I think they're going to be in better shape with guys that are going to be able to come in and they're not being that much of a drop-off like there was this year when he left. So not everything's going to be put on Brzee's shoulders to have to get it done. So I think and that's nothing against Jordan Williams or Niles Pinckney or anything like that. I just think these guys that came in, Decay Parts and all them that came in also with these guys, are equally as talented. And I think as they progress, they become NFL talent as well. And I think that's where the difference is when I look at what it was when the Power Rangers were here and what it is now. Because, as good as Huggins and those guys were, they didn't come in with the credentials that all these other guys came in with that are behind all these other superstars. And that's what's so exciting about this defensive line. Because when you look over at, let's be honest, look at Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant. Tell me who the backups were. One was Xavier Thomas.
That Xavier Thomas guy. That's pretty good.
That was it. That was it in 2018. That's really all you can remember is Xavier Thomas, right?
Well, and if you look at the backups for Lawrence, who we know couldn't play in the playoff, obviously one of those was Huggins, but the other 2 big backups are Williams and Pinckney, both of who just decided to transfer because they weren't going to be able to play enough with those other guys coming in.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so and then you look over there, you got KJ Henry as a backup. As a guy who probably starting anywhere else in the ACC. You got Maskell as a backup, who Dabo said progressed. Came on big, and he actually started more games than KJ Henry did at defensive end. And so they're just loaded with starters and talent and everything on that defensive line that I think, and people kind of argued with me on the website about, well, they're not as good as the 2018. So all I can do, I can't compare 2021 yet because that ain't happened, but I can compare 2017, which were the Power Rangers, to 2020 guys, which would have coming back this year. Led the country in sacks with 46. They both had 109 tackles for loss.
How many of those 46 sacks are back?
Every single one of them.
No, 45.
Oh, excuse me, 45.
Timber A stat. He tweeted that yesterday.
How's that? Who's the one missing since everybody's coming back?
He didn't tweet that.
Oh, it must be Jordan
He said
Williams.
45 of the 46.
Must be
sacks are
Jordan
back.
Williams or Niles Pinckney, I guess. But anyway, so they had 46 sacks this year. They had 46 in 2017. Both led the country. They both had 109 tackles for loss. Second in the country this year, was 6 back then. And by the way, they played 2 less games this year than they did in 2017. And then when you look at the yards per carry, yards per play, all those things that the defensive line impacts, the 2020 defense rivals that. And every single one of those guys are coming back for the most part, except for the guys that left that we mentioned, Pinckney and Williams. I tell you what, to me, that's what gets me excited about this potential of this defense.
Clemson had some problems at times in the secondary this year.
Yeah.
What fixes that? Or what's one good thing that fixes that? Is a dominant defensive line.
Correct.
And as we've talked about, whether it's the Power Rangers, we know it's deeper, they're going to have a defensive line next year that's going to give teams fits. So that's going to help the guys on the back end.
Yeah, and think about this when you look at the defensive line, right? I mean, the defensive backs. Look at all the people that they had interchanging all year because of either injuries or guys were in the love shack or different things for different reasons, that they just never had that continuity for a set number of games. You know, it wasn't like it when Mullen and those guys were in there and they're back there every week, and Tanner Muse and all those guys, and you could count them every week. They had like, how many starters did we figure? Like at one point, 10 extra starters that were all, and most of them were in that back end.
I mean, if you're Darren Kendrick, you got to come back for another year in the love shack, right? Why would you go to the NFL when you can come back and spend another year at Clemson in the love shack?
Absolutely. And so you look at Darren Kendrick, he needs to show that he can stay on the field more consistently. Andrew Booth could not stop being injured. He was injured one way or the other, and I think that really hurt Clemson down the stretch and in that Sugar Bowl because he wasn't 100% healthy. Sheridan Jones, though he played a lot, he'll tell you he's got a lot of things he's got to do to get better, and that's what looking at film and things of that nature and going in spring practice helps do. So I know fans are like, oh, the secondary was awful. But with all that we just said, how they were interchanged, they had all these people coming in and out and all this stuff, they still finished second in the ACC in pass defense. They led the ACC in completion percentage defense. They led the ACC in interceptions. This secondary's got a chance still to be pretty good.
Well, I think if you look at corner, Booth, Kendrick healthy, playing every game, that's as good a pair of corners as Clemson's had.
Absolutely.
Under Dabo. Absolutely.
Both first-round draft pick kind of
guys. And then all those guys you mentioned are depth. And
right.
then you mentioned we hadn't talked about a guy named Malcolm Green. Who
I even mentioned him yet.
Came on really strong at the end of the season and could play corner, but plays dime.
And is nasty.
He is nasty.
He's like Brian Dawkins nasty.
Yeah, I mean, he's got that energy. I mean, he's the kind of guy you like seeing on the film. So we saw him really come on strong. Mm-hmm. So there's, again, just like the defensive line, your 2 starting corners are both potential first-round draft picks, and we got more depth than we've had since, and we've got some, by the way, we got some great guys coming in the 2021 class.
Yeah.
Add to that mix. All right, so let's go from corner to probably the biggest question mark on the defense, safety.
Right.
That's where Clemson really had problems at times this year. We talked about Turner coming back, which from a leader of the secondary standpoint is huge. Mm-hmm. Dabo has said several times he thinks he's the best safety he's had while he's been coaching. He's the best safety up here. He's not
Correct.
necessarily the best safety athletically, but up here he is. So obviously Zanders went through some injuries. Gosh, the Notre Dame game, I think we were down to our third team safeties there at the end of the game. Yep. And in the overtime. That's probably the position where we need to see the biggest upgrade. Yeah,
and it's not like, I think the guys are there, like a Joseph Charleston and those kind of guys are there that can really help them in those areas. I think they could be good. It's just a matter of, they got to go into camp and spring training and kind of like understand what mistakes they were making. They were trying to I don't know if it's coaching. I don't want to necessarily blame it on coaching. Maybe it wasn't watching enough film. Maybe it's just they're not used to playing back there. But there was a lot of peeking into the backfield. They were trying to read the quarterback's eyes instead of doing what they're supposed to, especially in that Sugar Bowl game against Ohio State. They were so worried about the run that they were just trying to see what Justin Fields was going to do in the zone read and things, and they just let guys run right past them. And that's some of the stuff that I think coaching and getting in the film room will correct, because I think from a talent standpoint, Robert, when you're just looking at ability, the guys are fast, They're big and strong. They're tall. They can do all those things that you need your safety to do, but they just got to make sure that, as you mentioned with Nolan Turner, he's got it up here. He just maybe doesn't have all the physical attributes that they have. They just got to start getting it up here, and that's where Nolan Turner does help. And also the experience Landon Sanders got last year, I think it's going to be big for him to kind of have that year. Because remember, we forget, he was just a sophomore last year. And so he's going to have another year where he can go watch 11 games, how he played, mistakes he made, and how he can correct it. And I think that'll pay dividends for Clemson this season. Experience is everything. As I said before, it's not like this is a bad defense. This was the defense that led the ACC in total defense and was second in scoring defense. So this is a very good Clemson defense that just had a couple of bad games, but for most of the year they were very consistent. And so they can fix these little things and they can become a very dominant defense.
Well, and you've got a 5-star Carter coming in that could play linebacker, could play safety. Sounds like Clemson's going to give him a shot first at safety. He's the 5-star freak that brings all the athleticism and all the things some of these other guys don't. So he's going to be in the mix at some point next year as well. That's going to push some of those other guys. All right, let's move to linebacker.
Yeah.
And this is intriguing to me because you've got Skowski coming back, quarterback of the defense. We saw the defense with him, without him. We've got Spector coming back, which is another big addition coming back this year. Both those guys are really good tacklers, not super freak athletes. Mm-hmm. And then on the edge at Sam, you've got Mike Jones, very experienced. You also have Simpson. And Simpson, to me, he's the guy I'm intrigued to see what Venables does with this spring and next year. Because he played that position that Mike played, but he's a different athlete there. And he could do some things coming off the edge as a defensive end or as the Sam linebacker. He's that kind of X factor. So I'm interested to see as Coach Venables tries to come up with some plans and maybe some surprises for those Georgia Bulldogs I was talking about. I'm interested to see what he does with Simpson.
Yes, Simpson is the Isaiah Simmons. And as I came out with an article this week, I said Clemson's found their next superstar linebacker. I really believe that, and it is Simpson, because when you watched him later in the season as he got it, how dominant he became, that Notre Dame game, that ACC championship game, he was all over the place. He was flying and making plays, and he was so much better positioned than he was just a month earlier when he played Notre Dame. And he came in and started that game for Mike Jones. And so he actually started the Sugar Bowl. A lot of people probably don't know that. He actually started in the Sugar Bowl. And when you look at his stats on the season, he actually had better stats than Mike Jones. He had more tackles. He had more tackles for loss. He had more sacks. He had as many passes defended. The only thing Mike Jones had on him that was more was interceptions. So I think that's going to be a great battle in camp, and it's going to make both those guys good because they're going to kind of go after and challenge each other. You got the experienced Mike Jones, who's as rock steady and as good as anybody, and you can actually move him and put him over at a different position if you want to.
Do you leave him there? Do you leave that status quo? Do you maybe move him over to give him a little more athletic person over where Spector's playing, or just?
It's a good problem to have.
Coach V's got some pieces. You've got Bentley, who showed he's a daggone knockdown.
Go get him.
Ball.
Go get him, man.
There's some guys that he's got some interesting pieces.
Kane Patterson, who I thought came in and did well, and when his opportunity. McGuire, I thought when he got his opportunities, came in and did pretty good. There's pieces there, as you mentioned. They got some pretty darn good linebackers that I think they'll just get better. And with Skowski now being in the middle, being back for another year, and he kind of just anchors it all, and he kind of makes sure all the guys are lined up and in the right place. And you saw how much better that defense was when he played as opposed to when he didn't play. And I think, this year, if there's one thing Venables will probably do in the spring and the summer, is he's probably going to make sure that they have a little more depth in the middle.
Absolutely.
To where there isn't that much of a drop-off again. And I don't know, is that Kane Patterson? Is that McGuire? I know his son Jake's coming back. What do they do with Jake, and how do they use him in that situation? There's a lot of question marks there on what they do, but what Venables does know is he cannot allow that to be that big of a drop-off again if something were to happen to Skowski.
So linebackers, we think will be better. We got to see what they do with all the pieces. But that's a look at the defense. As you've heard from all of those breakdowns, it seems like every position on the defense, every group should be better. Depth all over the place. A lot of reasons to think that maybe next year Clemson's got that championship defense again. Stay tuned to TCI. We're going to have a lot more headed your way from the TCI studio here as we take a look at things as we head into the Georgia game, head into next season. Stay tuned to TCI for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting.